Drew here, and episode 6 of Only Murders in the Building to Protect and Serve. It's been said that audiences will forget about your plot, but they will remember your characters, which is probably why I'm still enjoying this show and would still give it a positive review, even though I feel that it's been very, very thinly plotted in the last 3 episodes in particular. The name of my channel is Plot First, but I acknowledge that plot isn't everything. Plot should complement the other elements in a story and not just be the end-all, be-all. So this story is working for me despite the fact that we're basically going at a very, very slow pace of development for the mystery. I feel the show has also gotten progressively less funny as it went on. Even the scene this episode where we're watching Cinda Canning on the Fallon show. Like, Fallon is laughing hysterically, and I was sitting here going, what's he laughing at? There's literally nothing funny being said. And I feel that that was kind of a problem for the episode on the whole. The funniest moment for me was when Oliver was reluctantly getting ready to rip up the check from Demas, and he couldn't bring himself to do it. That was probably the only part in the episode that even got a mild chuckle from me. There just wasn't a lot of funny stuff, and I feel like this show's best asset, with actors like Steve Martin and Martin Short in the cast, is its humor, so I wish that they were being a little bit funnier. I think it's a good thing that we know where this season is going, that we know ultimately there's going to be something disastrous. Mabel is going to stab someone with a knitting needle, and Oliver and Charles are going to end up fleeing the building in a panic. So, knowing that it's going there, knowing that there's something exciting at the end of the season to look forward to is kind of getting me through some of these more ho-hum episodes. So this episode, Mabel's mom shows up at the cousin's tattoo shop, and they end up heading over to the house and having conversations about the podcast. And it's interesting that both Mabel's mom and Oscar are kind of like, okay, you're living in the past, maybe you shouldn't do this podcast. I feel like it's interesting because it's thematically something that has happened a lot in this season, where you see Mabel continually drawn back to the investigation, even as the people in her life suggest that maybe she shouldn't. And I'm not entirely sure what the show has to say about this. I kind of feel like maybe they're going to go in a direction of, to move on from the past, you actually have to confront it, which could play into Charles's storyline as well. We'll have to wait and see. I found it humorous, though, that because they were spending most of the episode just conversing and not investigating the case, Charles and Oliver actually spent a good deal of the episode thinking about not doing the podcast because they don't want to exploit Mabel's history. And this is the first time that they've had to grapple with this, because up till this point they didn't know that she had any personal connection to the case. And of course, the line that I brought up in my last review,
every true crime story is actually true for someone.
And this is just occurring to you,
came out this episode, and I think that that's been a recurring theme of the show even up to this point. But it was funny to me that in this episode, where they spent so much time not investigating the case, they had to find a way to advance the mystery, and they basically used the same technique twice, where they had characters looking at a random object, and they're not actually doing any kind of detective work, and all of a sudden one of them goes, wait a second. And in the first case, it's Mabel and Oscar looking at this photo as they're reminiscing about their history in the Hardy Boys group. And then they notice that this jewel that Tim Kono had been obsessed with was on the finger of Oscar's girlfriend the night that she was murdered, but that when he found her body, the ring was missing. So, what that means and how that's going to help them solve the case eventually, I'm not entirely sure. But then they had this same technique to introduce another piece of evidence, as I previously mentioned, when Oliver's getting ready to rip up that check, and all of a sudden Charles is like, wait a second, it says Angel on it. Could it be the angel that was linked to Tim Kono, the person that he was frightened of? Oh my goodness, this is an obvious connection. And two things right away about this clue. I feel like this would be a hilarious way to parody the true crime genre by having, like, next episode, you know, they're building all these imaginary connections between Tim Kono and this angel company that Demas is associated with, and then all of a sudden it turns out, oh, you know what, why did we think they were connected again? Because the name Angel, you know, there could be a lot of things named Angel that have no connection to Tim Kono, right? And then they feel like idiots. I feel like that would be a funny way to go with it. The other thing I was thinking is I can't wait to see Demas's reaction when he's listening to the podcast and he gets to the end and they're like, and our sponsor is now our chief suspect, and he just does a spit take right into the camera. Like, what? I'm sponsoring you for this? You kind of wonder if they're going to cash the check or not before they go ahead and do an episode about him as their potential chief suspect. So, you know, it was kind of funny, I thought, the way that they introduced these developments in the case in an episode where they weren't actively investigating the case, that they kind of used the same technique. So I feel that Oscar did disrupt the balance of the group a little bit this episode, but I've kind of figured out how they're going to keep him out of the mix. And it seems that they're just anytime that Mabel starts to, you know, investigate something to do with the murder, they have an out, because Oscar will just say,
all I wanted to do today was just be with you. I've thought about this moment a lot.
I don't want to think about the murder. I just want to think about how much I love you. And then they can, you know, he'll leave because he doesn't want to investigate the murder, and they can have the trio again and he'll be off the table. It's interesting. Some of you have questioned in the comments whether or not perhaps Oscar has some connection to the person that murdered Tim Kono. Perhaps it's his father, one of you had hypothesized. And I actually think that's a decent possibility, because yes, it could just be a writer's trick to get Oscar to leave so that Mabel can investigate with the other two. But it could also be that he's getting uncomfortable because they're getting uncomfortably close to someone that he cares about. We'll have to wait and see on this one. This episode, To Protect and to Serve, I think it takes its title from Detective Williams. I feel like this character, like, we get to know a little bit about her home life, that she's expecting a son with her partner, who her partner turns out to be listening to their true crime podcast. And this causes her to go back and look at the fact that some of the evidence in the case wasn't logged, and it seems like maybe someone at the police station is trying to cover something up, or is trying to keep this case from getting too much attention. But I feel like her decision to send evidence to Charles and Oliver, man, it's really hard for me to fathom a professional police detective ever doing this. Like, I think, yes, she might very well go and try to solve the case on her own, sure, but to turn this evidence over to a bunch of amateur podcasters, I mean, that's just so reckless. And I don't think that there was enough development in this episode to justify her making this decision. Like, I get that she's listening to their podcast and she's like, oh, yeah, they're working it out. But I don't think we've seen anything from Charles and Oliver and company to make you think that they would inspire confidence in a police detective, that they could handle this investigation. So I feel like her making this decision really, really undercuts her as a character and makes her seem really, really inept. I liked her a lot better when she was just making fun of them.
We're neighbors in the building.
So you don't know him?
Just in passing.
Not his passing.
No, yes, when we passed by him.
Before he passed.
That's right.
Didn't like this decision, and it felt like a lot of time with a character that didn't need to be in this story personally. So those are my thoughts on this episode. Let me know what you thought in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of Only Murders in the Building and other shows, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching.